This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
Aloha and welcome to the monthly public lecture of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. The Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, since 1990, has continued to follow our mission of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education, as we've grown to become one of the largest nonprofit vegetarian societies in the nation. We'd like to encourage those of you who are not yet members, and even those of you who are not yet vegetarians, to join the Vegetarian Society tonight. You'll receive an informative newsletter, as well as discounts at grocery stores such as at Down to Earth, all vegetarian, organic and natural, and at many vegan and vegetarian-friendly restaurants on Oahu, Maui, and Kauai. If you spend as little as $10 a week on groceries or on eating out, your membership will more than pay for itself. So please join tonight before you leave, or join online at vsh.org. You can also choose to save trees and get a full color version of your newsletter by email. Thanks again to Terry Bear, who's also starting a new VSH vegan support group. It's already had its first and second meetings. It's called Imagine a Vegan World. So please check with Terry, and she's got her information sheets there for details. Please be sure to stay after tonight's talk to enjoy samples of tasty vegan foods donated by the generosity of Down to Earth. We're recording tonight's presentation for broadcast on the VSH TV series Vegetarian, which appears on public access channels across the state, including on Oahu's Olelo Channel 52 on Wednesday mornings at 11 a.m. and on some Thursdays at 6 p.m. You can also view videos of this and many of our past presentations on our website, vsh.org, where you'll also find lots of other great information, including recipes, our famous dining guide, as well as past newsletters. It's now time for a special guest. We're delighted to have with us tonight our own Dr. William Harris, MD. A vegetarian since 1950 and a vegan since 1964, Dr. Bill Harris is a founder and current officer of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii. Prior to his retirement, he was an emergency physician and director of the Kaiser Permanente Vegetarian Lifestyle Clinic. He received his medical degree from the University of California, San Francisco in 1963, and is the author of The Scientific Basis of Vegetarianism, which is now available online free at its website on vegsource.com. At age 81, he is an active acrobatic trampolinist and skydiver who has logged 1,280 lifetime parachute jumps. Dr. Bill Harris's presentation tonight is entitled Getting Started. Please welcome Dr. Bill Harris.
The name of this presentation is Getting Started Light. I wrote a thesis for the Vegetarian Society back in 1991. It was called Getting Started. It was way too long, so I don't know anything for sure, but on the basis of 62 years as a vegetarian, 45 years as a vegan, and 48 years as a MD, the following is what I think. First thing I think is that all of the nutrients, all the human nutrients, are synthesized in the leaves of green plants. The plant is harvesting sunlight, which is a source of energy, and it is taking inorganic substances like water, carbon dioxide, and oxygen, and all of these elements. And first of all, it is making glucose, which is sugar. And once it has the sugar, then it makes all of the essential amino acids, both of the essential fatty acids, all of these true vitamins here, plus all of the phytonutrients. So, not surprisingly, you're going to hear me say towards the end of this lecture that the best food for humans is leafy green stuff. If you want to pick up some freebies online, you can go to my website. A lady just bought the last printed copy of The Scientific Basis of Vegetarianism. However, you can pick it up for free. You just go to my website and you download it as a PDF, and you can keep it if you want. The other thing you can get at my website is the United States Department of Agriculture USDA database for free. It's a 16 megabyte Excel download, and it comes with about 12 different pages. I just added a couple new ones here. I included a couple of anti-nutrients. How many people have heard of phytic acid or phytate? It soaks up some of the minerals like zinc and calcium, magnesium. And oxalic acid up here is another one. There's a bunch of leafy green things that have a fair amount of oxalic acid. That interferes with the absorption of calcium. Now, this is the beginning of the real talk here. This fellow over here, who is a vegetarian, he's a PhD in psychology, and he observed that 3 out of 4 vegetarians or vegans quit. So he wanted to find out what the cause of that was. So he found this 77 former vegetarians, and 35% of them said they stopped because they were becoming less healthy. 25% said there were social stigmas of being a vegetarian. Another 20% said they had irresistible urges to eat animal products. And 15% more said it took a toll on their social life. Well, you can join these two together, and you get 40% of people quit because of social reasons. It's a little bit isolating to be a vegetarian if you're not used to it. 35% quit because they think they're getting less healthy, and 20% have irresistible urges for animal products. Well, my comment is that I think I know why these people quit. It's because a vegan diet is already very restrictive, and the problem is that a lot of our best known gurus are making it even more restrictive than it needs to be, and it becomes intolerable, so people quit. Now, as far as the social problems, we've now got brand recognition. Vegans are turning up in comic strips. I think we're safe, he drives like a vegan. I don't know exactly what a vegan drives like, but I haven't had any accidents lately. Here's a vegan who refuses to say cheese. And here's another a couple more vegans who say soy instead, when vegans pose for photos. And there's a dog who's disgruntled because, why did I have to be rescued by a vegan? Talking about biting the hand that feeds you. And here's a farmer, a vegan farmer, getting up in the morning. He's saying, well, time to go out and milk the rice. And here, this is my favorite. This is Moses about to lead the children to the land of milk and honey. And this guy, who is the original annoying vegan, is saying, I don't use milk and honey. And furthermore, I have a long list of objections to anybody else using it. So if we're that well known, I don't think we have too much of a social problem. And here's a good one. Here's a vegan family over on this side, and on this side, people asking the eternal question, where do you get your protein? And that is a non-issue. Okay, my advice is A whole food vegan diet and daily exercise are the prime determinants of health. I also suggest that occasional fasting is a good idea. If you've never fasted, just try going without any food for a day. Just drink lots of water to make up for it. The reason the fasting or a fast is a useful strategy is that it gives your body a chance to catch up on its housekeeping. You don't have to really get into it hard unless you know a lot about it. Okay, now I also think that macronutrient ratios are irrelevant. And that's what we've been arguing about for the last 40 years. It really doesn't matter what percent of calories you're getting from protein, carbohydrate, and fat. What matters is where the food came from. My last suggestion is that self-observation is the key to success. You may have noticed that your body is constantly sending you signals, and most of them are things that you don't want to listen to. So you pop an aspirin instead, and your body is really trying to tell you, hey, you're doing something wrong. Figure it out and change it. So watch yourself, and if your path toward a vegan diet is not working so great, why change it? Or quit completely, because if you can't make a vegan diet work in spite of your best efforts, we're not going to be improved by having another sick vegan, and you will not be happy trying to be one. Now, I mentioned exercise, and a lot of people think, well, exercise, that's so that you can lose weight. Well, it's not a very efficient way to lose weight, because if you drink one of these Coca-Colas here, you're going to pick up 100 calories. It's completely empty calories, and in order to get rid of those 100 calories, you'll have to go out and run a mile. So it's much more sensible not to drink the Coke or eat the bad stuff in the first place, because once it's inside, it's going to be hard to get rid of. Okay, here's rule number 1. And I replaced all of the other dicta with just this one. If it has no fiber, don't eat it. All of these orange-barred foods have lots of fiber. None of these foods have fiber because they're either animal foods, which have no fiber because animals cannot metabolize cellulose, which is the main ingredient in fiber, or because the food is a refined carbohydrate or it's vegetable oil. And those are both empty calories and they have no fiber. Now, fiber is not really a nutrient because you never metabolize it, you can't digest it, but it's a really good marker for healthy food. Here's rule number 2. I must admit I can't follow this one completely, but if man made it, don't eat it. And that's because this little guy over here, who's the CEO of this fast food outfit, has a mantra, and it is make the food taste better than it is, so that you will eat more of it than you should, and so that I can make more profit than I deserve. And the way he does this is he puts fat, sugar, and salt into everything. Those are the 3 most addictive substances known to the human race. And the end product is this burger and a shake and French fries. And here's the RDA arrow. If you got all your calories along this RDA line, you'd get enough stuff on the right side of the line, but on this left side, you'd be short in at least a half a dozen nutrients. The graph's not big enough to read completely, but I'll get into some others later. Now, supposing if you're the man that made it, you can start with perfectly healthy food. You have options of things that you can do to it. And maybe the best thing to do is just to eat it raw. And I think that a general rule is if you can eat it raw, do so. If you have to cook it, start with something easy like steaming, because the only thing happens is you get some modification of some of the nutrients, you break some of them down a little bit, but it's not really bad. If you boil it, you'll lose some of those nutrients because in addition to breaking the stuff down, the water is going to take some of the vitamins and minerals out, and you will never see them again. If you microwave, it's about the same as boiling, because you're simply heating up the water inside the food until it starts moving around real fast, and that's the definition of heat. So you have approximately the same effect as boiling, but with an external electromagnetic field that leaks out of the microwave. So the real hazard is not to the food, but to you. So be careful when you're around a microwave. Now, if you bake it, that's not a bad way, except that you'll wind up with increased advanced glycation end products, which are substances that interfere with a lot of metabolic functions that you would rather not have interfered with. If you broil it, you get even more. And if you fry it, that's the ultimate catastrophe, because you not only get aged, but you also get a lot of fatty side reactants. Well, our masthead for the last 20 years has said ethics, ecology, and health, and I want to touch a little bit on each of these. First of all, we're the only species on the planet that needs ethics, or that worries about ethics, because we're the only ones on the planet that can blow themselves up. This guy is not very ethical. He'll eat anything that he can catch, but it's not going to be a big problem. But it's something we ought to think about. And when the inevitable doubter asks you, well, how come you're so uppity about not killing things, and you, in fact, are killing this poor tomato here? I had to take this argument on in midweek one time. A guy said that every time he sliced a tomato, it screamed. And I owned up as to having assassinated a couple of thousand tomatoes, and I never heard one scream. I think the reason is because while we indeed are killing things, even when we eat plants, scientific definition of life is growth, metabolism, movement, reproduction, and response to stimulus. And the plants have all of those things. But animals have all those things plus two more things. They have a nervous system and consciousness. It's very much similar to the same consciousness that we have. And if we want our own ethical system to work, I think we should stop killing the animals. Now, there are environmental issues involved too. I think you probably all are aware that the WHO has stated that livestock production causes more greenhouse gas than all of transportation. And that's because using animals for food is essentially inefficient. When you eat eggs, you're wasting something like 75% of the protein. If you eat a lamb, 97% of the calories, so you're losing an awful lot. And naturally that is going to result in very inefficient food system. So now we come to the question, how come there's so many diet gurus? I went through the Hawaii State Library one day, found 1,782 titles, all dealing with overweight. I guarantee you that each one of these books has got a fan that says, it just swears on a Bible that book solved their problem. And yet not one of those books had any mention of the V word. Nobody wants to talk about vegetarian. They want to talk about some astrological way to get at your weight problem. How should we eat? Well, there are two approaches to it. The first one is biblical, and the other one is evolutionary. And there isn't much doubt about this one. This is Genesis 1:29, and God tells man, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed. It's a very difficult syntax, but basically what he's telling Adam and Eve to do is to become whole food vegan vegetarians, which is what I just told you. And I mentioned that there is no talk here of eggs, fish, meat, milk, grains, beans, oils, potatoes, or cooking. So that's a whole food, raw vegan diet. I take the evolutionary path. I think that we can best understand how we got where we are by looking where we were. And primate evolution goes back 60 million years. And if you look at the diet of contemporary primates, you find that the bigger they are, the more likely they are to be vegetarian. The less animal food. The red bars are the percent of calories from animal food. And as you get down into these tiny little primates, like the fat-tailed lemur, which I haven't seen much of lately, or the dwarf galago, they're eating a lot of bugs. And it makes good sense for these small animals to eat bugs because they can collect the calories that they spent on catching the bug by eating the bug. Just in case you didn't believe my graph, here's one that somebody else did, and you got the same thing. The heavier the primate, the less animal food, the more plant food, and the more fruit. Our remote ancestors were large tree-living vegetarians about 3 to 4 million years ago. And here's an example of a contemporary guy, a well-known friend of ours, a gorilla. Genetic similarity by proteins between us and the gorilla is 1.9%. That's not the similarity, that's the difference. He's a big guy, sort of follows with the general trend of big primates being vegetarians. Genetic distance between us and chimpanzees is about 1.6%, and between us and this little tarsier, which is a small primate, it's 24%. There are energetic considerations to being a large primate living up on the top of a tree, namely the higher you fall, the harder you land. And that all has to do with Newtonian physics. So we don't really know what the people that came after the primates came out of the tree were eating. The evidence is that they made use of whatever they could find down on the savannah. And somewhere about 500,000 years ago, they found out about fire and they started digging up tubers, ate a lot of starchy materials that were available. And that was a very good strategy for them. And then somewhere along the line, they started eating animals, also an adaptive strategy. I have doubts as to whether any of these well-known authors pay much attention to the time scale of primate evolution, and for that reason I think they're giving us some bum dope. This is the meat side of the equation. Well, I should point out that once you're on the standard American diet, which is represented by this, there's no place to go but up. You can go up going this way and you get better, you can go up this way and get better, but the standard American diet is rock bottom as far as nutritional health goes. So Cordain is talking about the Paleolithic diet, but paleo means only 25,000 years ago. That's a drop in the bucket compared to 60 million years of primate evolution. And some of these guys are leaning pretty heavy on the starches and the grains. I don't agree with that because they're saying you should never eat raw nuts and you should never eat an avocado. These are mortal sins. Well, I think they'd have done just as well if they'd let people eat a few raw nuts occasionally, and we probably would not have had as many dropouts, because by saying it's got to be a high-carb, low-fat diet, we've simply set the restrictions too high. There's no real need to do that. I also don't think they understand that without fat, there would be no life on this planet. There's about 10 to 50 trillion cells in your body, and all of the membranes on the outside of the cell are made out of fat. There are a lot of little organelles on the inside that are also made out of fat, and there wouldn't be any life on the planet without fat, because that is the gimmick that nature uses to separate one watery environment from the watery environment inside the cell. It's the same way with the plants. They also have a fatty cell membrane, but on the outside of the plant cell, there is fiber, and that's why plant cells generally do not have much, well, they don't have any saturated fat. In June, I made a trip to the land of Darwinian selection, Africa, went down to Johannesburg and then flew up to Victoria Falls and found some interesting characters up there. This was a leopardess looking for lunch. We got her pretty close to her. Unfortunately, she had already lost lunch to this guy, who is a hyena.
You can see how they carefully put their hand on the ground.
Yeah. Is he likely to take on the hyena?
No. She's trying to get the food. That impala has been killed. She killed an impala?
Yeah, he probably killed the impala.
Yeah, she killed the impala and
Now the hyenas.
took over, yeah.
So now he's going to try to run the hyena out. And if you look real carefully here, you can see the leopardess's lunch right in front of the hyena. That's only part of the lunch. That's the stomach of everybody's lunch that you're looking at. That's the impala. And the leopardess had just torn out the impala's stomach, and she was planning to carry the rest of the impala up into the tree where she could eat it at leisure. But the hyena got it away from her. So here's the impala. His only defense is speed. Here's a close relative of mine. He's had the good sense to move up in the tree and get away from it all. Once in a while, a baboon will get caught by a leopard, but not very often, because they're pretty fast on their feet, and they're also very impudent. Here's a couple of the prime characters on the savannah. These are a couple of lion brothers, and they are moving out to find another lion pride, a male lion with a bunch of females, and if they can find that pride, they're going to kill the dominant male and then take over all the females. And after they have done that, they will kill all of the cubs of the females so that they can bring them into estrus and mate with them faster. So if any of you believed in Walt Disney's version of The Lion King, you better think again. These guys are pretty ruthless. And I might add that we don't have the same metabolism of cats. Cats need arachidonic acid, carnitine, DHA, EPA, retinol, and taurine, and those are things that we do not require because we make them ourselves. We found out that even lions have to be taught how to hunt, and they were pretty docile. Actually, they were a source of a good deal of amusement because we'd get up and walk around with them and flop down in the elephant poop. And Georgie kept telling them, not in the elephant poop, not in the poop. But that's where they seem to like it for some reason. Now here's nobody's lunch. This guy has solved the survival problem in Africa by getting so big that nobody can touch him.
From the right is dominant male, and the rest is just the females and the calves. Oh. The younger and the older calves. That's the family. And the male is a nomad. He doesn't stay with them. He just comes from nowhere.
Mm-hmm. So there are two dominant males here?
One.
This is perfect.
This is with the sun, and
it's the sun's in the right direction.
It is. It's perfect. This is Mommy Dearest. She's employing the same strategy. The lions can get at this little guy, but they can't touch Mama because elephant tribes are matriarchal, and all the mommies and the aunties gather around this little baby elephant and they protect him, and the lions leave them alone. Here's a baby elephant having a good time scaring off some guinea fowl. And nobody's going to mess with these guys either. These are hippos, and they cause more human fatalities than any other animal in Africa. This guy has a nice defense. He gets the best of the leafy greens, and he can kill a lion with one kick of his hoof. This is the Zambezi River. It's up at Victoria Falls. This is, in fact, Victoria Falls. It's the longest waterfall in the world. It goes down in here into the Zambezi River. This is the Victoria Falls Bridge. And this is what Victoria Falls looks like. This is another view Victoria Falls Bridge, and I decided that to really get a good look at the Zambezi, I should jump off of it, and so I did. About 2 minus G's at the bottom of this, but it was a beautiful view. And I want to talk a little about food oil because a lot of people think that this is okay stuff. And I say this is one of the worst things you can put in your mouth. You can't trace the history of food oil back before about 3500 BC in Egypt, when they started using olive oil and linseed oil. And then spread over the Indus Valley about 3200 BC. And finally it made it to the Song dynasty in 1200 AD, where they committed the cardinal sin. They started frying stuff in it. And that's a disaster. The worst thing you can possibly do to food is fry it. Here's a perfectly innocent baked potato, and it's got about 220 calories. You cut it into strips and fry it, you got 632 calories. And if you cut it into chips, you increase the surface area, of course, and so you wind up with 1,000 calories. So it's mostly fat with a little potato thrown in. And you also get things like peroxides, epoxides, aldehydes, ketones, etc. The reason people fry stuff is because water boils at 100 centigrade, soy oil boils at 300 centigrade. So obviously you can cook things faster with oil, and that gives you a nice taste, I'll have to admit, but it's super bad idea. The oils are not only 100% fat, but they're mostly linoleic acid, which is the first of the omega-6 fatty acids. And they have very little alpha-linolenic acid, which is the first of the omega-3 fatty acids. So these are bad news things. Safflower has a 746 LA to ALA ratio, and the flax is the only one that really does any good, and that's at 0.23. So it's got more ALA than LA. And the problem with oil is that it is absorbed almost immediately and goes into the thoracic duct, and then it goes all over the body. I finally dug up an article that addressed this issue. This is the speed of fat absorption. It's from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The top graph here is almond oil plus flour, and it gets absorbed very rapidly. The next one is just plain sunflower oil, but the bottom one, the triangles, are just almond particles. You put the particles in a grinder and beat them up a little bit, and it takes a long time to get the fat out of those. So that's why I think it's okay to eat raw nuts, but it's not okay to eat oil because the fat all gets absorbed immediately. Here are the three stooges cooking up our $3 trillion U.S. disease care costs: the USDA and the FDA and the IRS. Now, the USDA has been giving about $17.3 billion a year to all of the worst foods: meat and dairy, grains, sugar, starch, and oil, and about 2% to nuts and legumes, and 1% to vegetables. That's exactly the wrong way for it to go. And not that I'm suggesting that we should start giving supports to fruits and vegetables because they don't need them. They're making it perfectly well on the free market. What we need to do is get the government to stop giving money to people for making bad food that makes the rest of us sick. Here's the FDA's part in it. The FDA not only allows but requires labels that look like this. The outside of the promised margarine says it's ultra fat free. But if you look over here, you find out that there's 5 calories in a serving. All 5 come from fat. So it is in fact 100% fat. It's not fat-free at all, and they get away with it. And then the other problem is the IRS allows tax deductions for all this junk food here, the fast food people. They get about a 1/3 mark-off on their tax bill, so we're paying about 1/3 of their $4.2 billion that they spend on advertising every year. I think you all know of what that's doing to the obesity rates in kids. You can see the curve going up from 1963, still going up, it's getting worse. The reason a vegan diet causes weight loss is because you fill your stomach and meet your nutrient requirements before you meet your calorie requirements. As the foods that have the most nutritional value have a lot of volume, and they fill up your stomach. Your stomach starts sending signals back up to your brain that you've had enough to eat, and that part of the appetite goes bye-bye, and you can stop eating. And you can see these other foods have very much less volume and will not take up as much room in your stomach, so you'll still have plenty of room to put more food down. Thought I'd give you an idea of what a nutrient chart looks like. I made these charts up from USDA data. I took 93 vegetables, added them into a category, and then averaged them for these nutrients. And as you can see, 93 vegetables were short only in vitamin B12. That's the only thing missing if you eat vegetables, and you have tons of all this other stuff. Now, on the other hand, I have to admit, nuts are not all that healthy, not all that nutritious. They're missing vitamin B12, vitamin A, vitamin C, riboflavin, calcium, but they've got an awful lot of this stuff as alpha-tocopherol, and that's vitamin E, and that's a very important player. So they redeem themselves a bit by that. Seeds are also very high in fat, but if you're looking for alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, there's really only three choices: flaxseed, perilla seed, and chia seeds. These are the perilla seeds. You can get them over at Palama Market. And these are flax seeds. You have to run those through a grinder because otherwise they go in one end and come out the other without any change. And chia seeds look like this. Now, walnuts aren't bad, but they've still got more LA than ALA. So the ones up here are the ones that you ought to be putting in your grinder. Few people think that potatoes are the perfect food, and they point out that guys have lived for a year on nothing but potatoes. I don't think that's true, but I wouldn't advise it forever because the potatoes are not balanced. They're missing all of these things: vitamin A, vitamin E, calcium, riboflavin, zinc, folate. They're pretty good on all of these things on this side of the red arrow, but they're not too good on the others. The fruits are not bad, but here's the RDA arrow, and they're short on all of these things: phosphorus, calcium, protein, zinc, and B12. Now, grains have been the basis of food since the agricultural revolution 12,000 years ago, and probably most of us are eating a lot of grains. But they're not the most nutritious things. They're nowhere near as nutritious as greens. And one guy, the guy that started macrobiotics, said that you should eat nothing but brown rice. So take a look at the RDA arrow and all of the things that are missing on the left side, and you'll have no difficulty understanding why a couple of his disciples died of malnutrition from eating nothing but brown rice. Not a good idea. And the breads are missing about the same things because breads are made out of grains. Now, here are the grand champs. This is 5 average greens: collards, dandelion greens, kale, romaine, and spinach. And as you can see, the only thing they're missing is the vitamin B12. So think about leafy greens first. After you think about them, try to figure out how you're going to eat them, because, leafy greens are leafy greens. They don't have all that much flavor. But our president, Lorraine, came up with this concoction. These are kale chips. You take kale, put it in a dehydrator, and you add raw cashews, bell pepper, coconut, Red Star, nutritional yeast, that's for the vitamin B12, some garlic, cayenne, pink crystal salt, and you can also buy this stuff at the store now. So that's a really healthy and nutritious food, and it meets the RDA for everything. Now, how many people like artichokes? I'm nuts about them. I always have been. The problem is you got to put some kind of goo on them. First of all, you have to boil them. I used to use hollandaise sauce. My mother finally figured out that it was making me deathly ill, so I quit. And you can also use mayonnaise, but by far, this is the best thing I've ever had on an artichoke. So I figured I had to do something about that and invented this, or actually Georgie did this. It's the almond pate, and you make it with almonds, tomato, onion, garlic, Red Star yeast for the B12, carrot, and parsley. It comes out looking like this. You can eat your artichoke with this for a sauce, and it's great. A big surprise to me was artichoke, which I always thought was kind of an indulgence, actually turns out to be a pretty healthy vegetable. Here's the kilocalorie line here, and you can see that it meets the RDA for everything except vitamin B12. And then when you dip it in the almond pate, which is also complete, it has all of the necessary nutrients. You've got an automatic healthy meal. I want to introduce you to some old friends of mine. This is Sir William Osler, MD. He was a Canadian physician. He's known for a lot of really witty and acerbic comments. One of them is, only the desire to take a pill distinguishes man from the animals. And his other statement was, the first duty of the physician is to educate the masses not to take medicine. Now that seems a little strange coming from a doctor. These are maybe my favorite pair. They're over in the Vatican Library right now. This is Asclepius, who is the god of medicine. This is his staff. It's a staff with a single serpent coiled around it. Asclepius started the entire medical profession, the most financially successful enterprise on the planet, and which is now turned into a very good diagnostic organization. I put in 35 years as an apprentice to this guy, and I think that if you want to get a good diagnosis or an accurate diagnosis, your best bet is to go see the descendants of Asclepius. Find out what you've got, and then go talk to his daughter, who is Hygeia, and she's the goddess of healthy food and sanitation. And very likely, if you see her first, you won't even have to see this guy, because you can keep yourself from getting sick just by eating right and taking care of your personal hygiene. So my conclusions are, all of the essential nutrients are made by plants, not animals, and greens, leafy greens, are still healthiest foods. If it has no fiber, or if man made it, don't eat it. Animals evolve adaptive strategies. We saw some of them in those African animals that I took pictures of. Speed if you're either prey or predator, size if you don't want to be prey, and trees if you just want to get away from it all. That's my favorite spot. Cats are carnivores and pre-humans, that means hominids, the people that arrived on the savannah right after the primates climbed down out of the trees, were omnivores. But there was never a time when they could not have been vegans, because we're vegans. At least some of us are vegans, and we're doing fine. From that, it follows that there was never a time when eating meat was anything more than an adaptive strategy. It was not a biochemical requirement, as it is for the cats. They have to have meat. So humans adapted to the world, right now, I think the whole food vegan diet is our best adaptation for survival. Thank you very much. I can take some questions if there are any. Any questions? Okay, the question is, how about the long-lived cultures, such as the Mediterraneans and the Okinawans? Well, the Okinawans are eating almost all plant food, and so also are the Mediterraneans. And while they do use an awful lot of olive oil, the recent studies on what generates their longevity suggests that it's probably because they eat more vegetables and fruit. I personally think that the olives are kind of a red herring. Have you ever tried to eat a raw olive? You can't do it. Yeah. I kind of distrust anything that looks like you could eat it, but when you take a bite out of it, you find out you can't. You have to either soak olives in brine or in lye, and then you have to heavily process them to make them edible. So I doubt if the olives are the cause of the longevity. Now, as far as what will induce longevity, the only thing that induces longevity is calorie restriction. If you put rodents and other small animals, including mammals, on restricted calorie rations, they'll live longer. And the reason I think one of the reasons I think a vegan diet is good is because it's automatically a calorie restrictive diet, as I pointed out with the stomach shot. For calorie restriction, well, I think you can work out your own strategy. My strategy is that I do a one-day fast 2 or 3 times a week. So that's automatically calorie restricting. Now, if you want to have continual munchies all day, that works too. But the overall result has to be that you eat less calories than the guy next door if you want to increase your longevity. I think there was another question back there. The question is, how do you get rid of the oxalic acid in the greens? That's a good question. Boiling or steaming will get rid of most of the oxalic acid. And the other thing you can do is recognize that most of the leafy greens in the list that I have in that database are not really high in oxalic acid. Yeah, I think the oxalic acid dissolves and goes out. Do I recommend restricting calories before you do athletics? No. If you're an athlete, I think you have to get all the calories you need. Calorie restriction is something that us older folks think about. I used to be an athlete too, but I didn't restrict calories in those days. But of course, when you're young, you don't worry about longevity because you think you're going to live forever anyway. Okay, he feels that restricting calories is not a good idea for a young parent, and I certainly agree. Unless you're overweight, don't restrict your calories and get enough calories so you keep up with the kids. The question is about soy. Should we eat fermented soy? I think you can eat soy in any shape or form you want. I don't think that the fake meats are really very healthy. You get strange amino cross-linkages that are hard to digest. So they're not my first recommendation. I see no problem with soy or seitan or some of the fermented soy products because they've been more or less modified by nature. I don't see anything wrong with those. I think that's enough. Why don't you sign me out? Thank you all. And here is our prez.
Thank you, Dr. Bill Harris, for a really fascinating and informative talk tonight, both for those of us who have just started on our vegan journey and those who have been on it for a while. Right now, I'd like to invite all of you to join us for some delicious vegan refreshments donated by the courtesy of Down to Earth right there in the kitchen. And if you can, please put up the chairs in the racks behind you. Thank you all for coming tonight. Mahalo.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.